friends, my name is Vanidez and I'm trying something new today. I will see how this goes, and if you guys enjoy it, I will try to make it a more regular thing. But basically the idea is, even though I try to stay on top of all of the comments that I get on videos, because I feel like interaction is such a key part of this and it's why I'm here, really is not to talk to myself, but to have conversation with you guys. I thought it would be fun to do a video every time that I post that is basically answering some comments that I've gotten most recently. So basically just going through my recent comments and pulling out some to kind of address on video, especially for the purposes of inviting more conversation with you guys down in the comments. I think this is also really cool because I keep up with my latest videos in terms of comments, but I get comments on old videos all the time, and so pulling those back and revisiting some old ones might be fun. We'll see how this goes. I might do this one video and be like, yeah, nobody liked that, and never do it again, but here we go. The first one is from YapDog, and this is on my review of Ninth House. This was literally posted 26 minutes ago as of recording this, but YapDog says, I'm not going to put words in Leigh Bardugo's mouth, but there may be something to her making a white woman the biggest bad. In our world, racist white women may be considered the biggest bad. They have had and do have the greatest control of the fates of blacks, as recently illustrated by Amy Cooper. That was downright vile and disgusting, the way in which she used her power. I'm gonna be honest, and probably if I had gotten this comment right after I read Ninth House, I would have waffled a little bit more, but in July of 2020, I'm like, yeah, I feel this. And this is something that has been talked about before when you look at the 2016 elections and the way that white women support Trump and that base or whatnot. So that is definitely something that I think is in line with an overall message. I have not thought about Ninth House in a while, but I think my only hang up in truly considering it this way, that the idea that white women are the ones who are holding up the power, is that in this story we're talking about secret societies and ones that actually exist, and so you cannot divorce this idea of women hold up patriarchy from the fact that patriarchy would not exist if not for men. Do white women hold up patriarchy, and do we have internalized misogyny like all of us? Absolutely, but patriarchy and misogyny were not created by women, and especially not in these good old boys clubs. So to take a look at that structure and think about who benefited most across history from some of these wealthy power structures, ultimately to then say, but the woman, but women did it. I'm not 100% backing that particular message, but I do understand, and I feel like I'm more sympathetic toward an argument that is yeah, but there are definitely white women who are contributing and holding up some really bad power structures and practices, and calling 911 and Karening all over the place. I get that. A lot of people on my last video asked me if I had read Dominicana by Angie Cruz. So I do own this book. It is on my TBR. Here's what happened. My older sister is a reader as well, and she reads a lot of romance, and we don't really read the same books at all, but occasionally she'll tell me about what she's reading and whatnot. And she actually read this book before me, but she listened to it on audiobook and she hated the narrator. She really disliked, I can't even remember her specific complaints right now, but I just remember her talking about how the narrator for the audiobook kind of ruined it for her. So I knew that if I wanted to read this book, that I wanted to do it in physical copy. I got a book of the month copy, and then it's been languishing on my shelves because who reads anymore? Me. I'm starting to read again. Anyways, it is there. I will get to it eventually. I'll let you guys know how that goes. But yes, I have it. I am aware of it. I will read it. So Lilith said, thank you for bringing some authors to light. I don't know why. I always thought you read in Spanish too. But I think that if you can learn the language, you definitely benefit from it, as it opens up a whole new world of authors that never get translated, as well as TV shows, films, and traveling. So I do read in Spanish. I mean, I can read in Spanish. I don't read novels in Spanish. It's always something that I think about I should get more into. I remember having picture books and chapter books when I was growing up that were in Spanish, which is kind of how I learned. And then the other portion of it is just kind of teaching myself and knowing the language. I feel like Spanish is more intuitive in terms of learning how to read it. Also, I've always only attended churches that speak Spanish. So reading the Bible was an in Spanish activity, and then also, you know, growing up listening to sermons and singing songs in Spanish and all of that. Spanish was my first language. My thing is always that I think in English, and so it's very difficult for me to translate kind of as I go. And on top of all of that, even though I feel like I understand Spanish perfectly, and I, like, if you drop me in a situation, like, I will get out of it with my Spanish, like, I'm okay, there is a lot of like shame almost, or like embarrassment I should say, around me in Spanish, just because I don't feel like I sound like a typical Dominican in Spanish. Like, I don't have the accent or like the ease of speaking, and people, they don't do it on purpose, but if you say something mess up, the initial reaction is always laughter, like, haha, you got that wrong. And so that immediately puts people like kind of on defense, and that is 100% what happened to me. Like, I don't want to take the risk of saying something and saying it wrong, so I don't say it at all. Spanish, or any language, if it's a second language, like, you have to practice it to keep yourself kind of fluent, and I don't practice it as much as I should. I do translations though, English to Spanish and Spanish to English. I feel pretty comfortable with knowing the language in my head. It's speaking it that's a little bit more difficult for me. But this is from the Shades of Orange, and she says, I love With the Fire on High. Did you like this one more or less than that one? I didn't really love Poet X, so I'm hoping the new one is more similar to Fire on High. My ranking, like, even though I gave them all 5 stars, I think With the Fire on High is number 1, the Poet X is number 2, and Clap When You Land is number 3. And it's like, by like, I could almost flip the Poet X and With the Fire on High, but I'm somebody who mostly reads and enjoys novels, so it just gives it a little bit of an edge with the Fire on High because it is a novel and it isn't told in verse. So I feel like if you didn't enjoy her book in verse, the Poet X, but you really liked With the Fire on High, Clap When You Land feels a lot like the Poet X because it's that same thing. A lot of the themes are similar throughout the 3 books. I would give it a chance just because they're short, they're easy to read, and the audiobooks are always really spectacular. So I wouldn't discourage anybody reading Clap When You Land if they didn't like the Poet X, but I would say that those 2 are pretty similar. So, and this is a comment from Maria Beltran, and she says, have you read Dominicana by Angie Cruz? It's also a story of happy ending with a strong young woman. I loved it more than Afterlife. Not to compare both books since the plot is different, but I didn't like the way Julia Alvarez portrayed immigrants from Mexico, whereas Angie Cruz presents an immigrant from the DR very vulnerable at first, but full of strengths, dreams, determination, sacrifice, and an entire successful life ahead of her. This was really interesting. When I got this comment, it made me realize that I hadn't really thought about the representation from the undocumented workers who are Mexican from their side of it, because I was very focused and like my eyes immediately went to the Dominican representation. So I started to think back and try and see if I could really look at how they were represented. One thing that struck me was that Antonia sees them in almost a sort of like simplistic and aggressive way. She's very annoyed by the way that the one character is asking her for help, specifically because she doesn't want to get involved. She doesn't want to make her next door neighbor angry, and she's in the middle of her own grief. Like, her huge thing is, I need to take care of myself. I don't want to take care of you. But I got the feeling that the text is looking down on her point of view. It's never condoning her views on this worker, on his situation. I tried to think about more of like what it said about undocumented workers in general, but I would have to reread to really give commentary there, and you know, it would be not own voices. But I will say that in general, all of the other characters besides Antonia in Afterlife are a little bit undeveloped. This is a shorter novel, and so you really don't get the space to flesh out the characters that are around her, and it is also a very internally focused novel, so she's asking herself a lot of questions. She's, you know, observing a lot of things. She's working through her grief, and it doesn't save a lot of room to kind of consider the characters that are around Antonia. And I wonder if that's why this specific character is more one-dimensional. So if anybody has read Afterlife and you have more thoughts on the representation of undocumented workers here, I'd love to hear it. I would reread Afterlife, but probably not anytime soon, and I feel really bad that I didn't pay more attention to that side of the story. This is from Aaliyah B, and they say, girl, I knew you were Dominicana just from your name. It's true. I'm sure that I've shared this story before, but probably not recently. So my name is a combination of my grandmother's name. So my grandma on my dad's side was Inés, and on my mom's side, her name was Maria. So they put it together, Marinés. A lot of times people think that my name is Maria Inés separate, but no, it's like a mashup. And no, my mom didn't know when she made this name that she was spelling it exactly like the US Marines. I have never personally met anybody else whose name is Marinés. When Facebook was like an up and coming thing, one of the first things that happened is that my mom sent me like a profile, and she was like, this person's name is Marinés too. See, it wasn't only me. So I've seen people on Facebook with the name Marinés, and a couple of years ago I was on a recruiting trip and I was with a coworker, and he introduced me to somebody that he used to work with. And so I was like, hi, I'm Marinés, and I extended my hand, and he was like, no, you're not. And I was like, you're gonna tell me that I'm wrong? You're gonna look at me and you're gonna tell me that I'm wrong? I didn't say that. TikTok wasn't the thing. But I was like, yeah, my name is Marinés. He's like, no, stop it. Your name is not. I was like, yes, it is. And basically he was freaking out because his wife's name was Marinés. And so he literally took out his phone and texted her and was like, you'll never believe I just met another Marinés. And so she was like, put her on. And we texted back and forth. So I like knew somebody whose wife's name was Marinés. But otherwise, that's like the closest I've gotten to meeting another Marinés. The last thing I wanted to respond to was actually over on Twitter. And I will put a picture here because I'm doing this off of memory, but somebody asked me if I would do a recommendations video about books about grief, and I want to do this. I've already started like thinking about a list, but it reminds me that I don't often do recommendation videos on this channel. I love doing them. However, I just start second guessing myself, and this chronic rereader, as soon as I'm like, I would like to recommend this book, but I read it 3 years ago, then I start thinking, well, now I have to reread it to make sure that I like it and that I want to recommend it. Like, I get so much in my head about the things that I recommend that it's very difficult for me to do so. Pressure that I feel to like make sure that these are good recommendations, or that I'm not recommending something that, somebody would come back and be like, well, actually that's really bad, and then I'd be like, I don't know, I read it 4 years ago. Like, I realize that is all internal, but it is something that I deal with. So it really, and then the books that I read most recently, I'm like, I don't want to put these on a recommendation video because I've been talking about them because they're like recent content. So that's how I always end up talking myself out of recommendation videos. But I talk so much about loving books that deal with grief that this is something that I'm going to work on. Have I already thought about rereading some of the books that I would put on this list? Like, off the top of my head, Liesl and Poe and Million Junes. Like, now I'm like, wait, no, gotta reread them before I put on this list. Am I going to? We'll see. Will this list happen? We'll see. That's it for me today. If there are any comments that you guys see on my videos that you would like me to answer or react to, make sure to upvote them so they can kind of float their way to the top. If you enjoyed this, let me know. I feel like what I'm really doing here is cheating my way into Q&As. I ask for questions for Q&A like pretty regularly, or I don't know, occasionally I'll be like, hey, I want to do a Q&A, and then like nobody will ask me questions. You guys don't have to ask me questions anymore because I'm cheating my way into these videos by responding to your comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. And I just want to read about people solving things. Like, I don't know why that is making my brain so happy right now, but it is. I think you can see it just behind me, but I'll grab it.